It was a scorching July afternoon in 2018, the kind of day where the heat clung to your skin like a damp towel and every step felt like wading through molasses. In a quiet Dayton, Ohio suburb, Willow Lane was alive with the lazy hum of summer. White picket fences framed modest bungalows, their lawns sprinkled with dandelions and the occasional forgotten tricycle. Kids pedaled bikes in wobbly circles, their laughter mixing with the faint jingle of an ice cream truck 2 streets over. 9-year-old Ethan Hayes was out front, kicking his battered soccer ball against the curb, his sandy blonde hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His green t-shirt was faded, his sneakers scuffed, and his blue eyes sparkled as he tried to bounce the ball on his knee like the pros he watched on TV. "Mom, check this out," he called, laughing as the ball slipped and rolled into the gutter. Sarah Hayes, 34, sat on the porch steps, scrolling through her phone, a glass of iced tea sweating beside her. Her auburn hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she glanced up with a tired but warm smile. "Keep it in the yard, Ethan," she called, her voice soft but firm. He nodded, chasing the ball with a skip, his sneakers slapping the asphalt. Willow Lane was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. Neighbors chatted over fences, kids played tag until streetlights flickered on, and front doors were often left unlocked. Nothing bad ever happened here, or so Sarah thought. She stood to grab a refill from the kitchen, leaving the screen door ajar. "Be right back," she muttered, stepping inside to pour more tea and check a text from her sister. 3 minutes, maybe 4. When she returned, the porch was silent. Ethan was gone, and so was his soccer ball. Sarah's chest tightened, a cold dread washing over her. "Ethan!" she screamed, her sandals slapping the pavement as she ran down the street. Her eyes darted frantically, behind shrubs, across driveways, into the alley behind the park a block away. "Ethan, answer me!" Her voice cracked, panic rising like a tidal wave. Mr. Callahan, a retired mechanic next door, stepped out, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "Sarah, what's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "He's gone!" she shouted, her voice trembling. "He was right here!" Within 40 minutes, Willow Lane was a chaotic blur of flashing lights. Police cars clogged the street, their sirens piercing. The thick, humid air. Officers set up a command post on Sarah's lawn, radios crackling with urgent chatter. K9 units sniffed along the sidewalks, their handlers tugging leashes. Volunteers, neighbors, teachers, even strangers from nearby streets scoured backyards, alleys, and the wooded creek that snaked behind the neighborhood. He was wearing a green t-shirt, denim shorts, and white sneakers, Sarah told Detective Laura Bennett, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a clipped tone and a notebook already damp with sweat. And he had his blue soccer ball with him. It has his name written on it in blue marker. "We'll find him, Mrs. Hayes," Bennett said, her pen scratching furiously, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt that made Sarah's stomach churn. As dusk settled, fireflies glowed in the grass, and the search grew frantic. Drones hummed overhead, their red lights slicing through the deepening twilight. Sarah stood frozen on the sidewalk, clutching Ethan's school photo, her fingers trembling. Guilt clawed at her like a living thing. "I turned away for 3 minutes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, soaking her shirt. The search dragged into the night, flashlights darting like fireflies across the neighborhood. By dawn, the volunteers' faces were drawn, their voices hushed with exhaustion. Ethan was still gone. The weeks that followed were a fog of anguish, each day bleeding into the next. Sarah took leave from her job as a school librarian, unable to face the world beyond her front door. The Hayes home, once filled with Ethan's chatter, the thump of his ball against the wall, and the clatter of his toys, turned into a silent tomb. His room became a shrine. Soccer posters peeling at the corners, a half-finished model rocket on. His desk, a pair of socks balled up by the bed, as if he'd walk in any moment. Sarah's days were consumed by the search, stapling missing posters across Dayton, her hands trembling as she pinned Ethan's face, bright blue eyes and a shy, gap-toothed smile, to every lamppost, storefront and community board in town. Someone saw something, she'd mutter, her eyes darting to strangers in the supermarket or at the gas station, searching for a hint of guilt or recognition. Her brother, Matt, 38, with his grey-flecked beard and steady voice, tried to keep her grounded. One evening he sat across from her in the dim kitchen, the air heavy with the smell of untouched takeout pizza. "You need to rest, Sarah," he said, his voice low, his hands folded on the table. Sarah stared at Ethan's photo, her fingers tracing his smile, her eyes hollow. "Rest? He's out there, Matt." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Matt sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're not alone in this. Let me help. Let Greg help." Sarah shook her head, her jaw tight. "You don't get it. I lost him." By 2019, the case was cold, buried under newer files on Detective Bennett's desk. Her calls grew rare, her updates thin and mechanical. "We're still investigating," she'd say, but Sarah heard the resignation in her voice. Her husband Greg withdrew, burying himself in his job at an accounting firm. One night, after a tense dinner, he slammed his fist on the table, his voice raw. "We can't keep living like this, Sarah. It's tearing us apart." Sarah stared at him, her eyes cold and distant. "Then leave, Greg. I can't stop." He did, moving to a cramped apartment across town, leaving Sarah alone with her grief. She'd sit in Ethan's room, the silence suffocating, and whisper to his empty bed, "Where are you, buddy? Please come home." Some nights, she walked Willow Lane, the streetlights casting eerie shadows across the pavement, hoping for a sign, anything. The community began to fracture. Some neighbors pitied Sarah, bringing casseroles and soft words. Others whispered behind her back, their voices sharp at the local coffee shop. "She should have watched him closer," one said, stirring sugar into her latte. "Kids don't just vanish," another muttered. Sarah overheard them once, her hands shaking as she gripped her coffee cup, but she didn't turn around. She'd prove them wrong, no matter what it took. Her resolve hardened like steel, even as nightmares plagued her, Ethan's green t-shirt vanishing around a corner, his voice calling her name. In early 2022, a news report flickered across Sarah's TV, barely piercing her haze of grief. A vacant lot off Willow Lane, long choked with weeds, littered with rusted cans, and avoided by most, was being cleared for a new playground. Sarah hardly noticed, her life a relentless loop of grief and fading hope. Then, one August morning, her phone rang, startling her awake from a restless sleep on the couch. It was Detective Bennett, her voice taut with urgency. "Mrs. Hayes, we need you at the station. We found something." Sarah's hands trembled as she grabbed her keys, a spark of hope flaring in her chest for the first time in years. She drove through Dayton's familiar streets, the world blurring past her windshield. At the station, Bennett led her to a small, fluorescent-lit room that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. On the table sat an evidence bag with a weathered soccer ball inside. The name Ethan was faint, caked with dirt and time, but unmistakable. "A landscaper found it in the vacant lot," Bennett said, her tone measured, her eyes watching Sarah closely. The lot, a block from where Ethan vanished, was a tangled mess of brambles, broken bottles, and old tires, ignored by most since the neighborhood kids stopped playing there years ago. "It was buried under a pile of debris," Bennett added, flipping through her notes, "probably missed in the initial searches." Sarah's breath caught, her fingers brushing the plastic bag. "That's his," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's Ethan's ball." Her mind raced. Had he been there? Why hadn't they found it sooner? Was he still alive? The discovery reignited the case, stirring the quiet suburb like a stone dropped in still water. Police taped off the lot, their boots sinking into muddy patches as a summer drizzle fell. the air thick with the scent of wet earth and ozone. Officers combed the area, their flashlights sweeping through the overgrowth, unearthing a frayed shoelace and a rusted keychain with a faded soccer ball charm that matched Ethan's keys, which had vanished with him. Sarah visited the lot, standing behind yellow police tape, her raincoat slick with drizzle, her eyes fixed on the churned-up dirt. She met the landscaper Javier Ruiz, a wiry man in his 50s with calloused hands and a quiet, almost apologetic demeanor. "I didn't mean to stir things up," he said, shifting uncomfortably in his worn work boots, his eyes downcast. Sarah shook, her head, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "No, Javier, you gave me a reason to hope." She reached out, squeezing his arm, her voice trembling but grateful. Back home, Matt was cautious, leaning against the kitchen counter, his coffee mug steaming in the dim light. "It's just a ball, Sarah," he said, his voice gentle but firm, his eyes searching hers. "Don't let it swallow you again." Sarah's eyes flashed with a fire he hadn't seen in years. "It's not just a ball, Matt. It's him. It's proof he was there." For the first time since that July day, she felt a purpose, a reason to keep breathing. She threw herself into the renewed effort, joining volunteers who handed out new flyers with Ethan's face, now 4 years older, in an age-progressed sketch that twisted Sarah's heart. A stranger's features grafted onto her son's shy smile. "He's still out there," she told a crowd at a community vigil, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, the candle in her hand flickering in the evening breeze. Rumors swirled through Dayton like wildfire. Had Ethan wandered off, lost in the creek's woods? Was he taken? Some neighbors pointed fingers at a local drifter, Tommy Klein, a scruffy figure who'd hung around the lot in 2018, scrounging for bottles. "Always seemed off," Mrs. Callahan muttered at the vigil, clutching her purse. "Never looked you in the eye?" Others defended him, saying he was harmless, just down on his luck. The speculation divided Willow Lane, with heated debates at the community center and sidelong glances at the grocery store. Sarah ignored the gossip, focusing on the ball, its blue marker a tether to her son. The ball led to a break, but not the one Sarah dreamed of. A retiree Mr. Larson called the tip line, his voice gravelly over the phone. "Saw a pickup truck by that lot in 18, he said, pausing to cough. "Blue, with a busted taillight. Parked. There a while, maybe an hour. Looked out of place." Police traced the truck to Tommy Klein, a wiry man in his 40s who'd worked odd jobs around Dayton, handyman, delivery driver, before leaving for Kentucky in 2019. Detective Bennett and her team drove to question him at a rundown trailer park. Klein, with a scruffy beard and wary eyes, claimed he'd been fishing at a nearby lake that July day, and a friend backed his story with a vague nod. He had no criminal record, and the truck was long gone, sold for scrap. The lead evaporated, leaving Sarah hollow but unbowed. "That ball's a sign," she told Bennett, standing in the detective's cramped office, files piled high on the desk, a fan humming in the corner. "I won't stop." Her voice was firm, her hands clenched into fists. Sarah refused to let the setback break her. She launched a community group, Ethan's Hope, to raise money for a private investigator, renting a small office at the community center to organize efforts. She spoke at town halls, her voice raw but resolute, rallying neighbors who'd once turned away with pity or judgment. Javier joined, stapling flyers on his lunch breaks, his landscaping truck a rolling billboard for Ethan's face. "You're tougher than anyone I know, Mrs. Hayes," he told her one afternoon, handing her a stack of posters fresh from the printer, his voice quiet but sincere. Sarah gave a tired smile, her eyes shadowed but determined. "I don't have a choice." Javier, Matt, who'd once urged caution, started helping too, driving Sarah to meetings and sorting donations. One night, as they folded flyers in Sarah's living room, the table buried under papers and empty coffee mugs, He squeezed her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes glistening. Sarah's eyes welled, her throat tight. "I just need to know, Matt. I need to know what happened." Months passed, and the case stayed open, but answers remained elusive. Detective Bennett's updates grew sparse. "We're chasing every lead," she'd say, her voice flat, her desk cluttered with new cases. The trail grew colder, the flyers on Willow Lane fading in the rain, peeling from lampposts like old skin. Sarah kept going, fueled by a stubborn hope that refused to die. One crisp October evening, she walked to the vacant lot alone. The weeds were cleared, the ground leveled for the playground, with a small sign staked in the dirt, "Future home of Ethan's Park." The air smelled of fresh soil and possibility, the sky streaked with gold and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. Sarah held Ethan's soccer ball, its surface dirty and weathered, its weight solid in her hands. She traced his name with her fingers, the letters faded but still visible, each curve a memory of his laugh, his hug, his voice calling Mom from the yard. "I'll keep looking, buddy," she whispered, her voice steady in the fading twilight, carried by the breeze. Ethan's fate remained hidden, lost somewhere in the shadows of that Ohio suburb, a mystery that haunted Willow Lane. But Sarah was no longer just a grieving mother. She was a beacon, held up by a community that, despite its fractures, refused to forget. The ball, with its smudged blue marker, was a fragile thread to her son, a reminder that hope, however faint, could endure. What do you think happened to Ethan Hayes? Was the ball a key to unlocking his disappearance, or a heartbreaking coincidence that stirred a mother's hope? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were Sarah? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories that pull at your heart and keep you guessing.